Alright, so today we're talking about a topic that's been kind of circulating for a while now, leading up to Requiem's release, and it is kind of the fate of Leon, I guess, in this game. So, for anyone who doesn't know, it's clear that in some way or another, Leon is infected with something in this game. We can assume it's Alpis, but it could be something else. And yeah, there's certain clips in the showcase, some of the trailers, where he looks kind of like rough, not looking too good. And the theory is obviously, is he going to bite the bullet in this game? Like, is this going to be like his send-off game? And I do want to talk about that topic in general, because it's something that's come up a few times with modern Resident Evil, and just kind of lay some thoughts out with it and stuff like that. So this is obviously not going to be directly kind of looking at if he's actually going to die, because we don't know, and there's no point in speculating until the game is out and seeing it for ourselves. But this is more the topic of the well-known cast of Resident Evil and how they kind of show them in each game, I suppose. So let's just look at the whole franchise for a moment. So the games are usually kind of released in the year the game is set in, right? So Village released in the same year that game was set in, and Requiem is, I think, around the same time as well. So they kind of follow the real world dates and times in the franchise from when it started, okay? Which means, like the whole series 1 through 9 and some of the smaller spin-off games as well, they're all a canon story, right? So the characters are aging. And that's obviously something that you see more in Village and more in Requiem at the minute, with Chris and Leon clearly looking older and a bit more kind of, even in Village as well, with what little we see of Chris, they're just kind of sick of it now at this point. Like they've been doing it for ages, and it's just, even, and Chris said something about it never seeming to end. Like, it just keeps coming. Everything always seems to go wrong somewhere, and I think it makes sense in a way. And I think, with how Capcom use their characters, they're very, protective of those characters. No single character has ever died. You can look back all the way to the first game, Jill, Chris, Rebecca, Barry, and all the way up to 9, where Leon and Village, Chris, they're still there, they're still alive. And I think it's something they've got to be very careful about doing, because people have been playing, games with these characters in for years now. It's coming up to 30 years this year since the first game came out, so it's a long time. And obviously old fans were there from the start, and people have kind of joined along the way and have got close to these characters, and it's difficult to kind of think about the idea, probably for Capcom specifically, of kind of just offing one of them, let alone like multiple of them. Now obviously along the way there's been introductions of new characters, so you've got obviously Grace in Requiem, new character. Everyone's kind of seeming to be quite positive about Grace, and rightfully so. I think the character's very interesting. Obviously the character is tied to a big history of Resident Evil, with obviously her mother being from Outbreak, and that character is mentioned in multiple games, even up to Resident Evil 7. She's literally in that game. It's like a book on a shelf, she's written. So she's been around for a long time. But sometimes with new characters, they don't necessarily stick. Obviously we've got Ethan, and I get what they were doing with Ethan. They kind of made this character as kind of like a clean slate character, where it was like, rather than fleshing Ethan out, is 7 specifically, they kind of made the player kind of step into the shoes of this character, and like, what if you were in this situation? Rather than like playing a game where you're watching Leon or Chris or whatever deal with it, you're kind of put in the shoes of this, average person, basically. And yeah, obviously they saw the reception for the character not being so great, and obviously in Village they did flesh him out more, but ultimately did decide to kill him off, and they introduced Rose, and that's such a convoluted thing to think about, with that character coming back in the future due to many different things. And I have a video coming out about plot lines and stuff, and Rose is included in that soon. But it's always a struggle, I think, with new characters in the franchise. You've got to try and get people that have been playing these games for years to connect with a new character. I think Grace is probably the best one they've done for a while. I'm hoping it shows in the game more, so they've kind of put a lot of time into this character. But from the trailers and the gameplay we've seen, I think she's probably going to be quite a solid character. I think fans will probably like the character after launch. But yeah, I mean, obviously back to the kind of the old guard of Resident Evil, as you would. Do I think Leon will die in this game? Probably not. I don't think they're going to kill him. People have their reasons as to what they think that is. I saw a few people say, you know, it's because of money, which is an odd thing, where they've said that, you know, I've seen this multiple times, and it's like, Resident Evil 4 Remake and 2 Remake sold really well, so why would they kill Leon when they can make that much money? And I'm like, okay, I don't think that's necessarily why those games sold that well. I think quite simply, people who liked Resident Evil 2 originally really liked that game and wanted to play it again. New people never played it because obviously it's an old game, it's hard to get into, I think, for a lot of modern audiences, and I've said that a few times as well. Resident Evil 2 Remake was more accessible, and maybe the same with 4 as well. 4 has always been the game where, even if you don't play Resident Evil, right, if you're not a fan who plays like every game or whatever, you know what everyone knows what Resident Evil 4 is. You just know what that game is. It's one of those games where you see it and you're like, oh, that's Resident Evil 4. Like, that's probably why that game sold so well in the first place. So I don't think he's got anything to do with necessarily the amount of sales it made. I mean, obviously it comes into it in some way, but I don't think it's like the main reason why. I think the thing I see happening most with these characters is maybe one of them somewhere along the line will be killed off. I don't know who. Someone's going to be mad at some point, you know, where their character gets killed, or something happens that's not necessarily a good thing. I think one of them eventually, maybe. But at the same time, you know, instead of just killing them off, you know, you could just retire the character. The way I've always kind of thought of it is, because the games are kind of a canonical, consistent storyline, you know, like, Resident Evil 10 is not going to be like anytime soon, right? But it's going to be a few years from now, because they're always like a few years between mainline releases, right? You don't want Resident Evil 10 to come out and then Chris like turn up in his wheelchair fighting zombies, you know what I mean? Like, they're going to get old. There's one character, and I won't say spoilers obviously, because I don't know how many people watch the movies, I guess, the animated movies, but there's one character specifically that has a bit of plot armor with how long they can be used for. But with Chris, Leon, Claire, you know, more so from the older games, you know, like the original trilogy, it's going to come to a point where they can't physically fight zombies anymore, and it's like, they need to start introducing new characters more, I think, while also giving the original cast a really good send-off, and I think that's maybe what they're going to try and do with 9. I think this might be the last game where Leon is playable, I'd say. If I was a guessing man, I'd say this is the last game where you're going to be able to play Leon as a playable character. He may appear in games later on, more so as like the guy in the chair, rather than like the guy that's going in to deal with things, right? I think that's the kind of the best way you could do it. I think maybe they're going to set Leon up as some kind of mentor for Grace, and then her kind of take over from him in future games. And then if you look at the flip side of things, I know, again, with timelines, it's really weird and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense right now, but let's just say that Chris, you know, he's mentoring, training Rose, and then she becomes a playable character, like a mainstay character for a while. I don't know, that one is just so up in the air at the minute with all kinds of like weird timeline. It's strange. But yeah, I think the best thing I could hope for is that these characters don't die. They just kind of get put into a kind of narrative position in the story, rather than like a playable position, if that makes sense. So overall, no, I don't think he'll die. If he does, I'll be very surprised, and I think a lot of people will be very surprised if they do kill him off. But I mean, we've got to wait now a few more weeks to see what happens. So leave your thoughts in the comments. Let me know what you think is going to happen to Leon, or any character from the franchise in that regard. But yeah, thank you for watching, and as always, I'll catch you guys in the next one.